Story 1: The Meth Village. My friends and I were looking for that perfect off-the-grid spot in the sprawling backwoods of Northern California. We were experienced campers, sick of crowded designated campsites with their fees and noisy neighbors. We wanted true isolation, the kind you only find by poring over maps and following unmarked fire roads deep into the forest. After hours of driving, our tires crunching over dirt and gravel, we found it. A clearing that was clearly an old, forgotten campsite. A rusted gate hung open, and the wooden sign marking the site was so weathered you couldn't read it. It was perfect. Secluded, quiet, and with the ghostly remnants of old fire pits. It felt like we'd discovered a lost piece of paradise. We set up our tents, cracked open some beers, and soaked in the golden light of the setting sun, feeling that deep satisfaction of a successful trip. The air was still, the only sounds our own laughter and a nearby creek. As twilight bled into true darkness, we got a fire going. The flames danced, casting long, flickering shadows that played tricks on our eyes. And it was in that flickering light that the first sign of trouble appeared. Two men emerged from the pitch-black woods, materializing at the edge of the clearing as if from nowhere. They had no lights, made no sound, and offered no greeting. They just walked with this silent, unnerving purpose right past us, their faces hidden by shadow, and disappeared into one of the old, dilapidated tents we had assumed was just abandoned junk. A cold wave of unease washed over us. The relaxed atmosphere vanished, replaced by a tense, watchful silence. Who were these guys? Why were they out here, in the middle of nowhere with no gear and no lights? My friends and I exchanged nervous looks, our voices dropping to whispers. The idyllic campsite suddenly felt foreign and hostile. We tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were just other campers, locals who knew the area, but the silence from the other tent was absolute and deeply unsettling. Minutes stretched into an hour. Our attempts to restart our conversation fell flat. Every snap of a twig, every crackle from the fire seemed deafening. Then the flap of the other tent was thrown open. One of the men stormed out, his movements jerky and aggressive. He strode to the edge of our firelight and just stood there, staring. He didn't speak. He just watched one of the women in our group with a prolonged, predatory intensity that made her skin crawl. The eye contact was unbroken, filled with a cold hostility that felt like a physical threat. After what felt like an eternity, he turned without a word and climbed into a large, beat-up pickup truck there parked just beyond the tree line, a truck we hadn't even noticed before. The chilling part was we could see a silhouette already waiting inside. That was our breaking point. The illusion of safety was shattered. This wasn't a campsite. It was someone's territory, and we were trespassing. Panic set in. We began frantically tearing down our camp, throwing gear into our cars with clumsy, shaking hands. Our hearts pounded in our chests, adrenaline making our movements frantic. As we were stuffing the last of our sleeping bags away, we saw the second man. He was skulking at the edge of the clearing, moving from tree to tree, a shadow trying to stay out of our direct line of sight. He was flanking us. We didn't wait to find out what he wanted. We leaped into our cars, engines roaring to life and shattering the forest's silence. We sped out of the clearing, fishtailing in our haste. And in the rear view mirror, I saw the headlights of the pickup truck flick on. It pulled out behind us. A terrifying chase began on the winding, unlit forest road. The truck stayed right on our tail, its high beams glaring, making it impossible to see. Every hairpin turn was a gamble. We were convinced the truck was trying to run us off the road. The only thing that saved us was our smaller, more maneuverable car. We pushed it to its limit until we finally burst onto the blessed asphalt of the main highway, the truck's headlights fading behind us as we floored it, not daring to look back. I reported the incident as soon as we had cell service. The state police later investigated the closed campsite, but they found it completely empty. The tents, the truck, the men, all gone. The only things left were signs of long-term habitation and a lingering sense of dread. We came to the chilling realization that we had likely stumbled upon what we could only describe as a live-in meth village. These weren't campers, they were occupants, and they were defending their territory. Story 2. The Man with the Shotgun. My friends and I were on what was supposed to be a relaxing weekend trip near a remote lake we'd been visiting for years. It was our spot, a place of shared memories and peaceful seclusion. We knew the area and we felt comfortable there. We spent the day fishing and swimming. As evening approached, we settled around our campfire, the mood light and easy. The sounds of the forest at dusk were a comforting blanket. But as the last light faded from the sky, a new sound cut through the chorus of crickets. Heavy, deliberate footsteps approaching our camp. This was unusual. We rarely saw anyone else out this deep. The footsteps grew closer, and a figure emerged into the flickering firelight. It was a man, probably in his mid-40s, with a thick, unkempt beard and a wild look in his eyes. What sent a jolt of pure fear through our group, though, was what he was carrying. A pump-action shotgun, held loosely but purposefully in his hands. He didn't say a word. He just walked a slow, deliberate circle around our campsite, his eyes scanning every detail, our tents, the coolers, our faces frozen in place. His presence was an immediate and profound violation of our sanctuary. We stayed silent, paralyzed by shock and fear. What do you even say to a man with a shotgun who appears out of the woods at night? After completing his circle, the man did something utterly bizarre. He walked directly to one of our tents, unzipped it, and went inside. For several agonizing minutes, we could hear him rummaging through our things. It was an act of complete dominance, a clear message that he was in control. When he emerged, he seemed even more agitated. He started shouting into the darkness, his voice raw and paranoid. "I know you're out there," he screamed at the trees. "Show yourselves. I know you're watching me." It was terrifyingly clear that this man was not stable. He was deep in some kind of paranoid delusion, and we had just become unwilling actors in his psychodrama. Then the situation went from deeply unsettling to life-threatening in a split second. The man raised the shotgun, aimed it into the dark woods where we had instinctively backed away, and fired. The blast was deafening, a violent explosion that echoed across the lake. The pellets tore through the leaves, just yards from where we were huddled. In that moment, we scattered, abandoning our camp and scrambling for cover in the dense underbrush, hearts hammering against our ribs. Hidden in the darkness, trembling, we could hear the man continuing to rant and rave. One of my friends, an avid hunter, had a rifle locked in his car. He whispered frantically to me, "Should I get my rifle? Should I shoot him?" It was a horrifying question to even consider. I tried to stay calm and made a split-second decision. "No," I whispered back. "We don't shoot unless he finds us and aims at us. We hold." A firefight in the pitch-black woods was a nightmare scenario with no good outcome. For what felt like an eternity, we remained hidden. listening to the madman stalk around our deserted campsite. We heard him crashing through the woods, sometimes coming terrifyingly close. The fear was absolute. It was hours before the man's movements seemed to grow more distant, his shouting finally fading. Only then, sometime between 2 and 3 in the morning, did we dare to move. We crept back to our car, leaving all our gear behind, and fled. We drove to the nearest town to report the ordeal to the police. The peace of our favorite spot shattered forever.
Story 3. The Claim Jumpers. My name is Kayla. My partner and I were experienced stealth campers drawn to the rugged beauty of federally protected forest land. An important detail: this was public land where we were legally allowed to be. We loved the feeling of being self-reliant, miles from any campground. We found what we thought was the perfect spot: a small, hidden clearing accessible only by a little-known service road. It was peaceful, beautiful, and felt a million miles from anywhere. We set up our tent, made a small fire, and settled in for the night, feeling totally at peace. Our peace was violently shattered in the middle of the night. We were ripped from sleep by a sound no camper ever wants to hear: a gunshot. Shockingly close. It was immediately followed by another, and then the distinct, terrifying whistle of a bullet tearing through the branches just above our tent. Raw, absolute panic took over. Voices were shouting from the darkness outside, guttural and angry. "Get off our land. You're not welcome here." There was no time to think, no time to pack. Adrenaline surging, we scrambled out of the tent in nothing but our sleeping clothes. We didn't grab phones, wallets, or car keys. We just ran. We crashed through the thick underbrush, branches tearing at our skin, our bare feet stumbling over rocks and roots in the pitch black. Behind us, we could hear the men shouting and laughing, and the sound of our campsite being destroyed, fabric ripping, gear being smashed against trees. We ran blindly, fueled by terror. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we saw a light, a single porch light from a small, isolated house. We stumbled out of the forest and into the yard, banging frantically on the door. A startled but kind elderly woman quickly ushered us inside and called 911. When the police arrived, the story became even more disturbing. The officers who investigated our campsite returned with a grim report. The site was ransacked. Our tent had been slashed to ribbons with what looked like a machete, and all of our valuable gear, phones, GPS, everything, was gone. The authorities confirmed what my partner and I already knew. We had been camping on federal forest land, public property for the last 50 years. But the lead officer told us this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. For years, they had received sporadic reports of locals aggressively claiming public land as their own. However, this was the first reported incident that involved gunfire. A few days later, a forest ranger contacted us, adding another layer of bizarre, organized terror to the experience. The ranger mentioned that over the past 5 years, there had been a handful of other unsettling reports from this same region. These reports described encounters with small groups, often dressed in strange, almost uniform-like clothing, who would approach campers late at night. Their methods were more subtle. They would make polite, seemingly innocent requests to lure one person away from the group, asking for help finding a lost trail or borrowing a tool. The ranger believed these were probing attempts, tests to see how vulnerable the campers were, with the intent to separate and then rob or assault them. My encounter was different. It was brazen and violent. The authorities speculated that these were likely the same people, their tactics escalating from subtle manipulation to outright armed aggression. my partner and I had stumbled into the territory of an organized group of modern-day claim jumpers who saw public land as their private property and were willing to use brutal violence to enforce it.
Story 4. The Silent Man. My name is Ian, and I specialize in vehicle-based stealth camping. My setup is my sanctuary, a nondescript van customized for stealth. On the outside, it looks like a work vehicle, but inside, it's a compact mobile campsite. I love the anonymity of blending into industrial parks or quiet suburban streets. My creed is to be unseen and unheard, a ghost in the urban machine. One night in January, I was passing through a small, economically depressed town in the Midwest. I found what I thought was a perfect spot, the far corner of a massive, mostly deserted parking lot of a defunct shopping mall. The streetlights were sparse and flickering, casting long shadows. It was bleak, but it was quiet and, most importantly, empty. I parked, drew my blackout curtains, and settled in. I was pulled from a light sleep by that primal alarm that tells you something is wrong. It wasn't a sound, it was just a feeling, a presence nearby. My heart started beating a little faster. I stayed perfectly still, straining my ears, but heard nothing. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, a common feeling for a solo camper. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Slowly, carefully, I peeled back a tiny corner of the blackout curtain on my passenger side window. My blood ran cold. Standing there, not more than 2 feet from my van, was a man. He was tall and gaunt, dressed in dark, ragged clothing. He wasn't doing anything. He wasn't trying the door handle or peering in the windows. He was just standing there, perfectly still, his head slightly bowed, his face hidden by the shadows. My mind raced. Security guard? A homeless person? A thief? I decided to try and take control. I rapped my knuckles on the window. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice sounding braver than I felt. The man didn't move. He didn't even seem to register the sound. He remained as motionless as a statue, a silent, menacing sentinel. "Hey, I see you out there." I tried again, louder this time, faking an authority I didn't feel. It was as if I wasn't even there. This was far more terrifying than an aggressive confrontation. The man's total lack of reaction was deeply unnatural. It felt predatory. Was this a game? Was he waiting for something? My hand hovered over the ignition, ready to start the engine and flee. I watched the man for what felt like an hour, my muscles tensed. The man's stillness was a form of psychological torture. He was a blank slate onto which I projected my deepest fears. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I reached for my phone to call the police, but as I did, I risked another glance out the window. The man was gone. He'd vanished as silently and mysteriously as he had appeared. There was no sound of footsteps, no car door slamming, nothing. Just the empty, shadow-draped parking lot. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat bolt upright in the driver's seat, keys in hand, staring into the darkness until dawn. I never posted a follow-up. The encounter was left as a chilling, unresolved fragment. Who was the silent man? What did he want? And that's what makes this story so profoundly disturbing. The not knowing. It's the horror of the complete unknown. A silent, human-shaped void that appeared outside my window and then simply ceased to be.
Story 5. The Coordinated Attack. My partner Graham and I were stealth camping in a remote patch of woodland in the English countryside. We were seasoned campers, traveling in a well-equipped camper van, and loved finding secluded spots far from the beaten path. We had found a beautiful, quiet spot down a little-used forestry track. We felt safe and secluded. There were a few other camper vans parked in a clearing about a quarter-mile away, but Graham and I preferred our solitude. We made dinner, watched the stars, and fell asleep to the sounds of the forest. In the deepest hours of the night, we were violently awoken. The entire van was shaking, rocking back and forth with incredible force. It wasn't the wind. Someone was outside, physically shoving our vehicle. Graham, a big guy not easily intimidated, shouted, "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? Get away from the van!" The shaking stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a heavy thud slammed against the side of the van, followed by another and another. It sounded like someone hitting it with a rock or a heavy piece of wood. The blows were rhythmic and powerful, denting the metal. Fear, cold and sharp, replaced Graham's anger. This wasn't just vandalism, it felt like an attack. Then the back window of the van shattered, sending glass across our bed. I screamed. Someone was actively trying to get inside. Graham grabbed the heaviest thing he could find, a cast iron skillet, and stood ready by the broken window, his heart pounding, expecting a hand to reach through the darkness at any moment. But no one tried to enter. The assault just stopped. All we could hear were running footsteps and then, distinctly, a car engine starting up, followed by the screech of tires peeling away. The speed and coordination were chilling. This wasn't a lone prowler. Shaken and terrified, we waited until sunrise. In the morning light, we inspected the damage. There were large dents along the side of the van, and the rear window was gone. As we were cleaning up the glass, some of the other campers from the nearby clearing walked over. What we learned next turned our fear into something much colder. The other campers hadn't been attacked, but they had heard the car. They described hearing a vehicle arrive late in the night, kill its engine, and then, after the attack on our van, start up again and speed away. This was a crucial detail. Our attacker, or attackers, had driven to this remote location with a specific purpose. Putting the pieces together, we came to a horrifying conclusion. Someone had likely scouted the area earlier, noted our van was the most isolated, and returned under the cover of darkness to attack us. The evidence suggested a coordinated effort, a planned assault rather than a random act. We had been targeted. The randomness of a lone, unstable person is terrifying, but the calculated malice of a group is a different kind of horror altogether. The trauma of the event was profound. For months, Graham and I were unable to stealth camp again, the feeling of safety in our van completely shattered. Every quiet woodland felt threatening, every dark road a potential ambush. We had come face to face with the reality that in the isolated parts of the world, you can be singled out, targeted, and attacked by people who operate with a chilling degree of planning.
The 5 stories you've just heard are more than just campfire tales. They're illustrations of a truth many of us prefer to ignore. The real monsters are human. The wilderness doesn't hold malice, it simply is. But the people you find within it carry all the darkness of the world we try to escape. They carry greed, paranoia, and a capacity for violence that can turn a sanctuary into a trap. Stealth camping is an act of trust. Trust in your skills, and trust that the other people you might meet mean you no harm. But as these accounts show, that trust can be horrifically misplaced. The thin wall of a tent or the metal shell of a van feels strong until the moment it's tested by someone who wants to get in. Thank you for joining me in the darkness tonight. If these stories left you with a sense of unease, then they've done their job. Remember to subscribe for more true horror stories from the edge of the map. And if you have a story of your own, please don't keep it in the dark. Share it. The submission details are in the description below. Stay safe, be aware, and remember, you're never truly alone in the woods.